60 days. And finally, Mr. Clinton asked the Attorney General, FBI Director, and National Security Advisor for a directive authorizing, quote, further steps necessary to combat foreign and domestic terrorism. Investigators want to question Mark Kornke, an anti-government activist apparently well known in the paramilitary movement. Kornke, a shortwave radio preacher, is being sought for sending a fax to a Texas congressman about an hour after the Oklahoma bombing. The fax obtained by CNN said, among other things, buildings 7 to 10 floors only, military people on scene, the ATF and FBI, and the last word was Oklahoma. Kornke sent it to Texas Congressman Steve Stockman.
I was paged. I returned the call to my office. They said, we have a fax that may concern the bombing, and I immediately told them to turn it over to the FBI. And at that time, they turned it over to the FBI. We also called the Justice Department and the FBI. It is our belief that the fax probably came in after the bombing. It is also our belief that, that we turned over everything that we have regarding it.
The FBI did not get the fax until 2 days after the bombing. The grim search of the bomb-wrecked federal building continues. Workers today are focusing on the second floor, which housed a daycare center. Officials say it will be a miracle if there are any more survivors. But rescue workers cling to the hope that among the dozens of children they expect to find, some may be alive.
The 50% cut in capital gains.
For the bombing victims. It's at a service at Bethel AME Church. It was dedicated to those who died in Wednesday's blast. At St. Peter's, similar prayers were said as a collection plate made its way around. The money will go to relief efforts in Oklahoma.
A disaster, and I don't know why people like this way.
I'm just praying for all the poor people, especially the children that were killed.
The president designated Sunday as a national day of mourning for the victims in Oklahoma. In the wake of the bombing, Senator Arlen Specter has scheduled a hearing for this week on an anti-terrorism bill. He says we need tougher laws against terrorism and that current laws hinder the investigation and prosecution of international terrorists. Senator Specter appeared on CBS's 60 Minutes last night with President Clinton. Taking a look at business news, the Dow Jones Industrial Average climbed about 39.5 points on Friday to a record 4,270 points.
Navigate his way to victory lane, winning the Bosch Sparkplug Grand Prix yesterday afternoon at Nazareth Speedway. First casualty of the day, defending champ Paul Tracy on lap number 30 gets together with Jimmy Vasser. Tracy, a severely bent front left wheel, he was done for the day. Tracy's teammate, hometown hero Michael Andretti, loose right front coming out of the pits and sent him into the wall. Michael finished 22nd. Eddie Cheever in the lead with 2 laps left, trying to stretch his fuel all the way to the finish. The strategy backfired. He ran out of gas. Emerson Fittipaldi, Jacques Villeneuve blasting by. A.J. Foyt, Cheever's car owner, that look and reaction tells the story. Fittipaldi holding off Villeneuve at the line to take his 3rd Bosch Sparkplug Grand Prix and 22nd IndyCar win of his career.
I was very confident. The car was running very strong the whole day. We had, I think, the best car on the track, and I'm very pleased.
We made some calculations on fuel. Didn't come out the way it should have done. Very unfortunate, but stuff happens.
Stuff happening, leading to Fittipaldi's victory. Stefan Johansson of Sweden there in 3rd. Pole sitter Robbie Gordon ending up in 4th, and Cheever, despite running out of gas, finishing a lap down in 5th. Second 5 from Nazareth, Rahal, Fabi, Pruitt, Fernandez, and Boiselle. Pruitt's 8th place position, enabling him to hold on to the PPG Cup Series points lead. The NASCAR Winston Cup stars on the shortest.
Questioned by federal investigators. At this time, he's being held on desertion charges and is considered a material witness. Iniguez had close ties to some brothers from Kansas. Police are also holding those brothers, James and Terry Nichols, as material witnesses. The Nichols brothers were kicked out of a militia in the Midwest. Leaders of the group called their views too extreme. The only person charged so far is Terry McVeigh, who investigators caught Friday. The search continues for more victims in the Oklahoma Federal Building. Rescuers believe the chances of finding survivors are slim. The death toll so far is 78. Rescue efforts halted several times through the night because of the danger of falling debris. When work resumes, people will continue probing the area where the building's daycare center used to be.
Pennsylvania Senator and presidential candidate Arlen Specter will be in Scranton today. Officials at the Lackawanna County Prison want money. They claim the prison needs improvements and...
You folks could even host Wayne Presley.
It's also looking for a man who went AWOL with Iniguez. Timothy McVeigh, a former GI with far-right political views, is in custody and charged with taking part in the bombing. Authorities are also holding two brothers, Terry Lynn and James Douglas Nichols, as material witnesses. The FBI is still searching for other suspects.
Longtime Mississippi Senator John Stennis has died at the age of 9.
Oklahoma City bombing. And as that hunt goes on, Americans join hands and spirits with the people of a shocked city to help the healing begin. Good morning again from Oklahoma City. This is CBS This Morning for Monday, April 24th. I'm Harry Smith. Good morning, Paula.
Good morning, Harry. Thanks. And I'm Paula Zahn reporting from New York. Also coming up, the militia movement. Uniforms, guns, angry words. But terrorists? We're going to take a closer look right here on CBS This Morning.
Paula, I spent the weekend in Michigan getting to know more about the militia extremists who may be behind the bombing of the federal building. It is a fascinating story about people with far-out theories of a government conspiracy against American citizens. We'll also have more on the extremist leader who fled Michigan and is now the subject of a huge manhunt. That's coming up in a bit.
All right, look forward to those reports. Also coming up this morning, White House Chief of Staff, that is, Leon Panetta, who will bring us up to date on the investigations going on. Right now, we're going to go back to Harry for the latest from Oklahoma City.
All right, thanks, Paula. Let's begin with the latest news here. The FBI has broadened the search for those responsible for the bombing here in Oklahoma City to at least 5 states, and they have taken another person into custody. Bob Orr has more from Washington.
Army deserter David Delgado Iniguez was taken into custody near San Bernardino, California, after he was identified as resembling the FBI's second John Doe composite. Iniguez, who authorities now say is not a suspect in the bombing, has been AWOL from Fort Riley, Kansas since last August. Another Fort Riley veteran, Timothy McVeigh, has been charged in the blast. 3 witnesses have told authorities they saw a man resembling McVeigh standing near a truck believed to hold the bomb shortly before the Wednesday morning explosion. And agents are continuing to search a field near McVeigh's Arizona home, looking for evidence of a possible test bomb set off last February. The FBI also is still questioning 2 brothers, James and Terry Nichols, being held as material witnesses. And authorities want to talk to militia activist Mike Kornke. Kornke sent this fax about the explosion to Texas Republican Congressman Steve Stockman just minutes after the blast.
As soon as we found out that it may have been tied to it, we turned it over to the FBI. And then we decided that it would be best, in order so that they could carry out the investigation, not to grandstand and do a press release and everything, but turn it over to the FBI.
Now, it may actually be a bit more complex than that. Sources tell CBS News that federal authorities did not learn of the facts until they were notified about its existence on Friday by the National Rifle Association. Meanwhile, today, federal agents on a number of fronts will serve more warrants and may make more arrests. Harry?
All right, Bob Orr live in Washington this morning. At the bomb site, the search for victims continues, but with fading hope of finding anyone else alive. 150 people remain unaccounted for. The confirmed death stands at 81. And for now, with me is Jane Robelo, who has more on the rescue operations. Good morning, Jane.
Good morning, Harry. At this point, the shock of Wednesday's blast is now turned to extreme sadness as each day the list of the dead is updated and released. Right now, the people of this community are clinging to one another. The sound of sympathy told from the nation's churches as Americans united in the National Day of Mourning. And rescue workers continued the solemn task of removing bodies from the rubble. Their goal is to reach the daycare center on the 2nd floor.
Well, we're taking it from 2 directions. We're coming from the south and the north, trying to meet our resources there where we believe the majority of those victims are.
But emergency workers have been constantly plagued by the structural problems in the torn building. A 20-foot square piece of debris dangled from the 9th floor, keeping rescue workers out of the building for much of the day.
We have been close. The problem is that several layers have fallen above it and collapsed.
The Reverend Billy Graham led more than 20,000 people in prayer during a memorial service.
B, this Terry Nichols. No, John Doe.
To show prayer service for the victims of this bombing. And while the nation's anger is still focused on those who did this, he announced plans for a crackdown on those who might try it again.
They came by the thousands, the victims who survived the blast and the relatives of those.
Well, we have to arrest the people who did it. We have to put them on trial. We have to convict them, and we have to punish them. I certainly believe that they should be executed.
And Oklahomans agree with the president. They say nothing less than execution will suit them. And Harry, this is one thing that one promise that they're hoping the president will keep.
All right, thanks, Jane. Let's go back to New York now to get more of this morning's news from Paula. Good morning again.
All right, thank you, too. It's just about 5.5 minutes after the hour. It's time for a look at the weather now.
Not lost America, for we will stand with you for as many tomorrows as it takes.
It was against this backdrop the president announced a new campaign aimed at combating terrorism. He'll seek legislation that will permit the FBI to infiltrate and expand their surveillance of suspected terrorist groups, and will prepare a presidential directive that would authorize any and all steps necessary to combat terrorism. On CBS 60 Minutes, an angry President Clinton lashed out at those who claim that government assault on the Waco compound 2 years ago was justification for last week's bombing.
I cannot believe that any serious patriotic American believes that the conduct of those people at Waco justifies the kind of outrageous behavior we've seen here at Oklahoma City or the kind of inflammatory rhetoric that we're hearing all across this country today. It's wrong.
But civil libertarians are afraid in the heat of the moment the federal government will go too far.
The danger here is to give such broad powers to the federal government that free speech and free expression and dissenting views will be chilled.
It's an argument that will occupy lawmakers and lawyers for months to come. But after last week, it won't go very far here.
And White House officials insist that these new plans will strike just the right balance between personal freedoms and public safety. And Bryant, before the president left here, he promised to rebuild this federal building as the people in Oklahoma City start to rebuild their lives.
Mick, has the president of the White House run these ideas for broader powers past the leaders on Capitol Hill?
They think that now is the time to strike while the iron is hot. There's already a bill up on Capitol Hill to combat terrorism. And if you'll recall, Newt Gingrich proposed some of these very things just a week ago.
All right. Mick, thanks very much. Turning again to the rescue efforts in Oklahoma City, work crews, as we told you, are continuing their painstaking search through the fragile remains of the Murrah Federal Office Building. NBC's Roger O'Neill has that story. Roger, good morning.
Good morning, Brian. Tired and depressed.
And so certain forensic details must be taken care of first.
The government has already demonstrated a desire to usurp the power of the people and use it for its own advancement and its own good. My concern is that there's no check there anymore.
They say the signs are everywhere. Militia materials show foreign weapons systems on U.S. soil. They circulate official-looking documents which they believe prove the U.S. government is building concentration camps on military bases. The future prisoners, U.S. civilians. The militia promise over my dead body. Most militia members see themselves as modern-day Minutemen, defenders of freedom. But in their midst are extremist elements, people who say the time for violent action is now. Here in Oakland County, Michigan, our sources tell us that just 2 months ago, a splinter faction of the Michigan militia was just days away from an armed assault on a National Guard base in the northern part of the state. The place, Camp Grayling, Michigan. The target, Russian tanks like these, routinely used for enemy identification exercises.
The plan was finalized that a small strike team would go in, set C4.
That's explosive.
Explosive, high explosive. Destroy the tanks and videotape it to win popular opinion in the militia's favor.
Eric Maloney is a former member of the 6th Brigade of the Michigan Militia.
This convoluted idea I spoke about with other members, saying that this is insane. This is unreal.
Maloney says he attended 4 different meetings where the attack was planned.
I was in charge of getting the men prepared for the mission. And I drug my heels. I spoke up. I did everything I could, short of going to the FBI, to get them to stop. Then they decided to go ahead with it, at which point I resigned and went to the FBI.
Do you think, had you not gone to the FBI,
the attack would have taken place on the 12th at 1900 hours?
The FBI told us last night that they indeed did receive information in February about a planned attack against a federal government facility in Michigan, and that they acted promptly on the information to neutralize, that's their word, neutralize the threat, but did not say how. They also said that they had not received any information on plans to attack any other location. The question remains, how can Americans be persuaded it's their duty to attack their own government? Part of the answer may lie in the words of the preachers of paranoia. Ask any militia member. The Branch Davidian siege was, in their minds, a deliberate government attack on innocent Americans.
In the course of investigating our government's actions in Waco, Texas in 1993, I came across the shocking, horrifying proof that our government intentionally murdered its own agents and the people at Mount Carmel in Waco, Texas.
Linda Thompson is one of several speakers whose radical message is spread throughout the country in public forums and videotape.
We will slow them down. We probably will not stop them completely, and this will become an armed confrontation. I cannot believe that the American people are going to continue to participate in something like this without realizing eventually that somebody's selling the cookie jar. They aren't just grabbing the cookies.
This man calls himself Mark from Michigan, now well known as the man who fled this Michigan home yesterday with a heavily armed group as federal agents began to hunt him down. Until then, Mark Kornke was just another shadowy figure on America's radical fringe. But our sources say he had big plans.
He believes in the violent overthrow of this country. He's an anarchist. He believes that anyone associated with the federal government should be liquidated.
Joe Ditzhazy is a former member of the Michigan militia.
Kornke's philosophy is an assault of philosophy. To me, Mark Kornke is the Jim Jones of the fringe movement connected with the militia.
Eric Maloney blames Kornke for pushing members too far.
He draws them in, puts them into a system, gets them trained, gets them indoctrinated with his material, and then sends them out.
He is the charismatic kind of person who can sit on a stage, command presence, and what he says is believable by the presence of his voice and his personality.
Maloney claims the men who planned the Grayling National Guard attack were disciples of Mark Kornke.
Mark Kornke believes in violence, and the average militiaman, Michigan militiaman, does not support violence.
For the record, Michigan militia head General Norman Olson has denounced Mark Kornke, but militia members must admit their mission and paramilitary style is a magnet for trouble. Eric Maloney claims Timothy McVeigh, James and Terry Nichols attended several Michigan militia meetings together.
They were interested in becoming active members of the Oakland County Brigade.
How would you characterize them vis-a-vis other members of the militia?
They were overzealous. It's the easiest way to explain it. Ready to go get them. Take on the world.
It was a very bizarre weekend, to say the least, Paula.
Harry, we know that there are these militias operating in close to 30 states. Has anybody given you an accurate statistic on the numbers of people involved across the country?
No accurate numbers, Paula, but I should say this. Some of the people that we talked to were quite clear in telling us that the numbers are far fewer than those advertised. And then we asked about, well, what do you do on these exercises? What do you do when you go out on these regular drills? One of the members, or former members, told us, mostly we just sit around and drink coffee.
All right, Harry, thanks so much. Coming up next, The View from the White House, we will discuss terrorism with Chief of Staff Leon Panetta. And coming up in our next half hour, we will talk with a neighbor of two brothers held as material witnesses in the bombing. And we're going to meet a woman with an amazing survival story. what it was like from inside the federal building when the bomb went off.
And 3 of them were no strangers to Dan Stomber. He's a farmer and a next-door neighbor of James and Terry Nichols, 2 men who are being held as material witnesses in the bombing. And he often saw the Nichols brothers and their close friend, Timothy McVeigh, the first suspect to be charged in this case. And Dan Stomber joins us from his home in Decker, Michigan this morning. And Dan, thank you for being with us. Let's start with Timothy McVeigh. How well did you know him, and what kind of person did he seem to be to you?
Well, Tim was, if you spent time with him, he's like a happy-go-lucky guy. I've never seen him get mad. I've never seen him get upset. He was, other than some of the things that went on, he was a good guy to be around.
What do you mean, other than some of the things that went on?
Well, I mean, some of the you know, strange views that he would agree with that James had, at times mildly agree with. He wouldn't openly agree to or talk much about any of his political views or things of that nature. I mean, this is kind of shocking to see the guy in the picture on TV where he's like so serious, because that wasn't Tim.
But he would get kind of riled up by James. Now, James and Terry, tell me what were their views? What was it that they were saying all the time about politics and about the government, about what they were mad about, that got Tim riled up?
Well, first off, Terry really never said anything to anybody, and it was usually hi or bye. It wasn't that he wasn't a very boisterous or conversational type person.
He was just along and went along with things. It was James.
Well, he was just, yeah, James, he's always shooting off his mouth about disliking the government, taxes.
Waco.
Yeah, he's made mention of that. Another gentleman out west that had some problems with the FBI just after that, I believe.
But besides all this talk, and I mean, you all got together and you heard them talking all the time, they also were constantly exploding bombs, I'm told, fertilizer bombs. What did you make of that? What did they tell you why they were doing it?
Well, actually, I'll set the record straight, in the pretense that it's almost like a kid with firecrackers. It's just, you know, it starts out as almost like, you know, to surprise somebody, like, you know, throw it behind your bang, it goes off. It's like, well, you know, what was that? And you'd almost get curious too, like, well, how the heck did you do that? You know, you couldn't believe that they could be taking like a peroxide or bleach or whatever,
But they got bigger
and make it go bang.
Yeah, but they got bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah.
Well, not in my eyes. I've seen them make them out of 20-ounce bottles, and that was it. You know, plastic bottles, and they packed a pretty good wallop.
So you're, in a way, as shocked as all the rest of us, and yet you heard a lot of this conversation. Dan, we thank you for getting up and joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Charlie?
All right, thanks, Joan. It's now 20 minutes after. The Oklahoma bombing has turned the spotlight on militias, paramilitary organizations around the country. A number of those named in reports about the bombing have been linked to an organization called the Michigan Militia, shown here training. And joining us from Harbor Springs, Michigan, the Michigan Militia's spokesman, Ken Adams. Ken, good to have you with us. Appreciate you joining us. You have said the Michigan Militia and other such groups are getting distorted press, but none of us can really understand why these groups are dressing up on weekends and in military gear and running around and having drills.
Well, Charles, you must understand that the Second Amendment was designed to form militias throughout our nation, and we've always had militias up until about the turn of the century. They were basically designed to be watchdogs upon the government, to inform the people of problems that they saw, much like the media is to do.
Isn't that what voters do, though, Ken?
Excuse me?
Isn't that what voters do? I mean, why do we need people to oversee the government? That's what voters do.
Well, that's exactly what the media does also, is oversee the government. Then we encourage people to go to the polls and get involved once again with their communities, the electoral process.
But we're not carrying guns, and we're not talking about waging war on the government, as some of these groups
and we're not talking about waging war on the government either. Everything that we talk about is peaceful. We absolutely disdain any type of violence. And I want the American people to know that they have nothing to fear of the militias. They are peaceful Americans. There are hundreds of thousands of people that are in the militia that are no more than concerned citizens that love peace and love their country. They love their government. Are there problems in the government? Sure. Are there solutions? Definitely. And the solutions should be brought about through the proper electoral process that is in place.
Ken, your leader, Norm Olson, said, as I saw him quoted, and you tell me if this is correct or not, that he could understand avenging Waco in the spirit of an eye for an eye. Was that in any way an attempt to rationalize what happened in Oklahoma City? Is that a correct quote?
Well, I think the quote was correct. I did not hear it. I believe that was on 60 Minutes last night. I believe what, in the proper context, what Mr. Olson was trying to say, really that was in a deranged mind, that possibly if this Timothy McVeigh is the person that we're looking for, in his deranged mind, that may be a way that he could justify what took place. Certainly it is not. No one would do this, kill children or anyone else to get even, but in a deranged mind, maybe they could see that to be justified.
In the final 10 seconds we have Terry, James Nichols, Timothy McVeigh, members of your organization?
No, they are not.
All right. Ken Adams, I appreciate you joining us. Thanks very much. 23 after, we'll be back.
Then one of the
Welcome back to CBS This Morning. I'm Harry Smith in Oklahoma City. Morning, Paula.
Good morning, Harry. Thanks. And I'm Paula Zahn in New York this morning. Coming up in this half hour, the government's self-imposed limits on tracking homegrown hate mongers. And we're going to hear from a Michigan man, a neighbor of two brothers held as witnesses in the bombing. Harry?
And Paula, we're going to also be talking about surviving an atrocity. We're going to meet a woman who experienced the bomb blast from inside the federal building last Wednesday. Paula?
Thanks, Harry. Now it's time for this morning's headlines. More suspects are being sought in connection with last Wednesday's deadly bombing in Oklahoma City. Only one person has been charged in the crime so far. The search continues for victims in the rubble of the federal building in Oklahoma City. Rescuers today are focusing on what was the child daycare center and a Social Security office. And prayers, tears, and memories for the victims. 8,000 people attended a memorial service in Oklahoma City yesterday, and millions around the nation joined in the mourning. It is just about 29 minutes before the hour. Time to check in with Mark McEwen, who has a brief look at the weather this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Bombing suspect Timothy McVeigh and material witnesses Terry and James Nichols. In Oklahoma City, searchers have finally cleared a path to what was once a daycare center. The same area housed several crowded offices and is likely to hold many of the missing, young and old. The number of unaccounted for was lowered last night to 100. More than 70 are known dead. Funerals will be held today for several tiny victims of terrorism, including 1-year-old Bailey Allman. The firefighter who cradled her in his arms plans to be there.
The arrest of Tim McVeigh was the result of an extraordinary combination of skill, luck, and timing on the part of the very government he allegedly detests for incompetence. NBC's Bob Hager explains how authorities broke the case.
In the first few moments, in the smoke, tears, and confusion, investigators never imagined they'd get a break so fast. Never imagined that so soon they'd find mangled parts of the truck that held the bomb, including its axles blown blocks away, one of which revealed a still legible vehicle identification number. A computer tracked that number to Ryder Trucks, headquartered in Miami, where employees said it was in Kansas, at Elliott's Body Shop, a Ryder representative out of Junction City. It was the first big breakthrough, and incredibly only hours after the bombing. Yes, said the agent, the vehicle had been rented just 2 days earlier. The crew-cut man said he needed a truck that would hold 5,000 pounds, said he was going to Omaha. The name the crew-cut man gave, Bob Kling, South Dakota driver's license YF942A6, turned out to be fake. But next day, the clerk helped an FBI artist make a sketch, and a sketch of the man's companion as well. And as agents fanned out over Junction City, at the Dreamland Motel, 1 day after the bombing, they hit pay dirt. Owner Lee McGowan said the sketch showed a man who rented room 25 at a discount rate and stayed 4 nights until the morning before the bombing. And this time, amazingly, he'd signed the motel registration with his real name, Tim McVeigh, 3616 North Van Dyke Street, Decker, Michigan. And from the Michigan Driver's License Bureau, they got McVeigh's Social Security number. But what they didn't know yet was that Social Security number would match the number of the driver of this car. It had been parked for a day on the shoulder of an interstate 60 miles north of Oklahoma City, ever since Highway Patrolman Charlie Hanger pulled the driver over 90 minutes after the bombing because the car had no plates. But when he leaned in to question the crew-cut driver, he saw the bulge under his jacket from a loaded pistol. Further, his story didn't make sense. Said he was driving cross-country but had no luggage. Trooper Hanger took him to the county lockup on a weapons charge and for the missing tag. And this is important. At booking, the man's real Social Security number was routinely entered in a nationwide computer that tracks criminals. Next day, 24 hours after the bombing, the prisoner would have paid $500 bond and been released, but for a simple problem. The judge was busy hearing a divorce case. But after the second night in jail, now 48 hours after the bombing, FBI agents in Oklahoma City finally made the connection. They compared Timothy McVeigh's Social Security number to those in that national computer program that tracks criminals. And bingo, the computer said McVeigh was the one who'd been sitting in that small local jail for 2 days. Assistant District Attorney Mark Gibson was waiting in the local court when a sheriff's deputy brought the news about the crew-cut prisoner in jail upstairs. He's the guy they're looking for, said the sheriff's deputy. The news had come just 30 minutes before McVeigh would have been brought down for his hearing, posted $500 bond, and been allowed to go free. But now dozens of agents descended on the little town. McVeigh was led away, and part of one of the most intense manhunts ever had ended in just 2 days, thanks to an axelrod and a divorce case. For today, Robert Hager, NBC News, Oklahoma City.
Amazing. In just a moment, just who is Timothy McVeigh? That's right after this.
It is said.
I was just sitting watching the TV, and here's 3-4 officers. I guess they were from the immigration. They asked me if I can come with them. I said, sure. So they took me inside one room, and they started questioning me for about 5 or 6 hours. The FBI came also, the customs, everybody was there questioning me.
Well, word came back that there was, I believe, there were some wires found in your bag, and that was one of the principal reasons at this point why you were really being questioned as a suspect. What were they, and how do you explain those?
I mean, this is really crazy, you know, when they talk about wires. The wires they're talking about, I had a phone with me, I had a VCR and a fax machine. And the wires they were talking about is the wires which goes for these things, you know.
So you just had normal things that you were taking along on this trip, which you would not have been able to find in the foreign countries you were going to, and these were what you plugged into the wall or plugged them into each other.
That's right.
That's the kind of wires.
Yes, and I guess they were just desperate for anything, you know.
When you got to London, that's where things got much more harsh. Tell me about that.
When I got to London, you know, I told him, all you have to do is just call the FBI in Chicago and they will tell you the whole story. I got nothing to hide. I didn't do anything. They stripped me all the way. They took all my clothes off. And in that moment, I asked for any American officer. They refused to do that. I was starving. I was so tired. I asked for the basic thing. I said, in order for me to talk and answer your questions, just please, I need something to eat. And they said, no, we can't give you anything to eat. We can give you something to drink, but nothing to eat. And I also asked them for a phone call so I can call my family back in Jordan to tell them that I'm not coming that day.
This, of course, all ended and you came back home, but are you resentful, and how do you feel about the way the media handles things and people jumping to the conclusion that because you're from Jordan that you had something to do with this?
I can understand, you know, the people here in the United States, why they feel that way. I've been through this before. After the Gulf War, everything, you know, goes in the world now. Exploding, bomb goes off in the world. A lot of people, they will think it's related to people from the Middle East, and I don't know why they have this idea. But by the authority in London, and by the FBI back in Washington, you know, to have the same idea, that's the thing make you mad, you know, that's the thing, why the media at the same time trying to make it look like it is connected to people from the Middle East. I just don't understand why. I mean, I can understand why, but that doesn't mean I like it, you know. I hear it, but there's nothing I can do about it.
I know there were some efforts yesterday to try to kind of mend the fences, if you will. Were you made to feel any better yesterday?
I did feel better because there's a lot of very nice people from Oklahoma City came and hugged me and gave me flowers.
And
they
apologized,
were very nice.
apologized for jumping to a conclusion.
But I wish like somebody mentioned that during the speeches, you know, like if the president or the governor or anybody mentioned anything about it.
Yeah, well, we'll mention it here this morning, and hopefully that will help mend the situation, because I realize that that kind of prejudice is very, very hurtful. So thank you very much for being with us this morning.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Okay, may life go on normal for you now.
Thank you.
It's 43 minutes after. Coming up next, when the O.J. Simpson jury refused to come to court, and how will Judge Ito take control now? Good Morning America continues.
It's next to the kitchen. It's in the park. It's a...
In general, especially with Terry or Tim McVeigh, they're easygoing guys.
All right, Dan, thank you so much. It is 18 minutes before the hour. Next, the amazing story of a woman caught in the blast who lived to tell the tale. Ready for... Since last Wednesday is, what would I have done had I survived the blast of that building when it exploded last Wednesday? And how would I be doing now? Or Jane Robelo is here to tell us about a woman who did survive. Good morning.
Good morning, Harry. A pretty incredible lady who survived this blast. We spent yesterday, the day of mourning, with her. She spent the day in church, in prayer. She says that there are resources that we all have that we don't know about until we're in a situation like this. It is a national day of mourning. But here at the Church of Christ in El Reno, Oklahoma, there is joy. Linda Riley works for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Her office was in the Murrah Federal Building, and she signed in for work at 9 o'clock Wednesday morning. Minutes after the horrifying blast, Linda Riley and her co-worker Rhonda stood at the edge of that bombed-out building. They were confused, frightened, and thankful that their lives were spared.
I really don't know why it was me, but I'm very grateful and thankful to God that it was me, and I had someone with me to go through it up there, because it was very, very frightening.
Glenda's faith took her through that frightening moment, and her family sustains her. But there is also confusion.
There are other people who've had a deep faith, too, that are gone, and I don't know why. And I don't understand it. Some of my best friends are gone, are missing at this point.
Today, our nation joins with you in grief. We mourn with you. We share your hope against hope that some may still survive.
Glenda was invited to join the memorial service on the National Day of Mourning. Survivors and families of the victims came together with thousands of Oklahomans for a time of healing. But Glenda chose to watch the service on television, surrounded by the most important people in her life, her children and her family.
We have to be joyful for what we have, but
saved. That's what's going on right now at that building over there. And we're very grateful that Oklahoma City Assistant Fire Chief John Hanson could talk with us this morning, along with Canine Search Specialist Lucy Reynolds from Phoenix, Arizona, and Fireman Bill Plumley from Oklahoma City as well. Good morning, everybody. Give me the status report on what's going on in the building right now.
Well, right now, we're gearing up for some more shoring operations. Unfortunately, it'll slow us down a little bit. We've identified some areas on the third floor. We're going to have to do some large-scale shoring operations. At this point, about a 4-hour delay.
How many people still unaccounted for?
We believe somewhere around 100. We're told, again, the area we need to concentrate on is the area where the Child Care Center, the credit union, and those areas in the front of the building. So
you're pretty close to that, though.
Pretty close, but it seems like every time we get where we're really aggressively pursuing that, we have a little setback.
Tell us about the American flags that are on the building, and how are the flags put up there? What's that all about?
Once rescue workers have completely cleared the floor of victims, the majority of the debris, we pretty well put it into that floor. We'll hang an American flag on it.
There you go. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was there was a rescue worker that went in immediately after the explosion and was injured, and she has died. What happened to her?
Well, it appears now that early on she must have been a bystander or something, rushed in the building for assistance, was injured in that, taken to a local hospital and died yesterday. It's just another tragic thing has happened to us here.
All right. Lucy, let's talk about this dog and how the dog has been holding up, and you working inside that building. What has this work been like for you?
It's a very important part of the search and rescue component. The dogs have, you can't rescue people if you can't find them. And as a member of the Phoenix Fire Department Task Force, a canine search specialist has a very important role to play. The dogs have held up wonderfully. She's had cuts on all four paws, as have the other animals have had other injuries, but they've continued to search and continued to do what we've asked them to do.
Gretchen wants to go back in the building, doesn't she?
Yeah, she's whined and cried and barked, and she now knows who our firefighters are, and she watches them go in and she watches them come out. She's emotionally attached to it, I think.
There has been an emotional outpouring from the folks in this community toward firefighters and the people who are climbing through there. Tell me about this dog bone button that you have on your jacket there.
Well, I hope the little child who made it is watching, but a lady rushed up to me last night with this little dog bone. It's actually, there's a pin on the other side of it, and some first graders made some little dog pins for us and the dogs. The whole community, we've probably got more dog food in Oklahoma City than we need for a year. All kinds of support. The children have really attached onto the emotional idea of a dog helping to find their loved ones.
Yeah. Bill, you are just out of the building back there behind us. How do you keep going in there day after day after day after day?
Well, until the building is completely searched from top to bottom, we just keep going, you know, with that little bit of hope still left.
Do you have hope? Do you really have real hope that there might still somebody be alive in there?
Until it's completely searched through every piece of rubble and every piece of floor, you bet.
It must be draining for you to be in there. These are long shifts. It's dirty. It's miserable. I've got to believe that the smell of death is everywhere. How do you stay whole? How do you stay in one piece?
Well, the other communities help. We help one another. We tell one another what good job with it that we think we're doing, and everybody's just working together as a team. And the efforts this morning seem to go real well.
All right. Thank you all very, very much for taking the time to talk to us this morning and get some rest, okay? All right. Take care. 23 minutes after the hour. Stay with us. There is much more to come from here in Oklahoma City when CBS This Morning continues.